Steven Donziger, you've heard me talk about him before. Steven Donziger is and has been for several years one of the main U.S. political prisoners. I suppose the number one U.S. political prisoner would be Julian Assange. However, he is in Britain, in a prison in Britain for fucking insane reasons, which, you know, I've obviously covered that endlessly. So keep fighting for Assange. But in terms of political prisoners in America, Steven Donziger is one of the best known, right up there with Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier, and others. So Steven Donziger, lawyer, environmental lawyer, won the largest ever verdict against an oil company, against Chevron. They owed something like $9.5 billion in Ecuador to the indigenous whose lives they destroyed, whose environment and land they just raped and pillaged. They went in there, they pumped out the oil for like 20 years. They had open pits of just fucking refuse and crude oil and all this toxic shit. And they told, not only did they destroy the water supplies, but they told the natives it was fine to drink. If you see little black things floating in your water, don't worry about it. Fine to drink. If your water smells a little funny, don't worry about it. Fine to drink. If your water can light on fire, if you can light your cigarette off a glass of water, don't worry about it. Fine to drink. That's what they told them. And those indigenous in the Amazon there lost hundreds, if not thousands of people to Chevron. So Donziger goes in there, young lawyer, and he says, I'm going to represent your case to these indigenous. Chevron, thinking at the time that they would have a better chance of winning in Ecuador, because I guess they figured the courts were even more corrupt than the United States, fought in the courts in Ecuador and lost. They lost to Steven Donziger and other lawyers, but he was the lead one. And they owed $9.5 billion. So take a guess. Did they pay it? Did they go, oh, we've done wrong. Man, have we harmed these people? Man, are we fucking toxic, horrible human beings? Is that what they did? Here's the money. We are so sorry. No, they pulled up their entire business out of Ecuador, so they would never pay $1 there. Then they've been chased in other courts in other nations to pay even outside of Ecuador. And their response was to go after Steven Donziger himself. They're trying to both slow him down, slow down their own persecution. And, you know, they're persecuted for a reason, right? They're being chased for a good reason. I don't mean illegitimate persecution. Slow down their own lawsuits and everything by going after the lawyers, going after them. And so they succeeded in finding corrupt enough prosecutors, judges in New York, in Manhattan, that they successfully got Steven Donziger locked up for years. He spent some of that time in an actual prison. He spent most of it under house arrest in a small New York apartment, couldn't leave. But also, it's tough to really overstate how much house arrest is not just, okay, you stay there for 2 years, we'll see you later. It is every moment you are supposed to be, you have on the ankle monitor, but you're supposed to be available for phone calls, and they'll call you in the middle of the night. And they'll come into your door, they'll knock on your door at any hour and say, we want a urine sample, we want a blood sample, we want to proof you haven't, I don't know what they forbid him from doing, but had a drink or had drugs or smoked weed or whatever. And he tweeted out once that they'll call him at 4 a.m., they'll call him at 5 a.m., and if he doesn't answer at any of these times, let's say he's so asleep he didn't hear the phone ring, then they'll come barging into his apartment and drag him to a halfway house, or they'll just do all kinds of crazy shit to make his life hell. So it's not just house arrest. It's also a Kafkaesque purgatory of shitstorm. So he was released today after 3 years for a misdemeanor of refusing to turn over his laptop to these horrible, corrupt prosecutors and judges. Refused to turn over his laptop because it would violate attorney-client privilege. And this misdemeanor, the worst that any lawyer has ever served for this quote-unquote crime, was 90 days. And he was held for 990 days. So I think I have it right, 990. So here he is. This is him speaking after finally being released from all of this.
Back. So I just came out of the halfway house. It's over. After 993 days, these are my release papers. All they really say is I'm not on probation or under any kind of supervision anymore. Woo! So I'm heading out of here, back home, start trying to live my life again. Thanks again to everybody. It's been extraordinary. Love to everybody.
So there he is. Free again after all this time. It's great to see him free. He really has done it. I've had him on the show multiple times. I had him on Redacted tonight. I was also talking about that case against Chevron and those Ecuadorians. I was talking about it long before he was persecuted. I first did a video on it, I think, in 9 years ago, 10 years ago on Moment of Clarity before Redacted Tonight even started, about Chevron was, back then they weren't going after him. They were going after the victims of the case. So Chevron was suing the Ecuadorians, the people they had harmed. This is what corporate America is. This is what corporate America stands for. People need to understand this. This is not an exception that proves the rule. This is not wait, what did I just say? Yeah. This is not an exception. This is not a rarity that a corporation acts this way. A corporation is, and they'll say, oh, we're legally bound to do it. But who created those laws? A corporation, and the largest ones are the worst, but a corporation will do everything they can to keep money, to make money. So if destroying indigenous people's lives, why were their lives destroyed initially? Because it was cheaper to fucking pump the oil out and leave it in the middle of the forest, anything they didn't need, just hose it, pollution everywhere. It was cheaper to do that than to actually deal with it. So profit over human lives. And then why did they go after, once they lost the lawsuit, did they go after the indigenous? They go after Stephen Donziger? Because it's cheaper for them to prosecute Donziger, to go after lawyers, to try and make environmental lawyers never come after them again, to go after the indigenous. It's cheaper for them to do all that than to actually pay what they owe to these human beings they've destroyed. Human beings' lives, to the families of the people they killed. And that's what they're going to do all day, every day. That's how they work. That's how they're set up. That is their goal. And that's how they got so powerful. If Chevron, on every level, this system promotes sociopathy to the top. That doesn't mean that everybody in business is a sociopath, but the ones that are dominating the industries that become the biggest. If Chevron, when it were created, was, we're going to treat people right. Yes, we're going to sell oil, which is a crime in and of itself, the death fluid of the planet. But if they said, we're going to sell oil, but we're going to do it in the most friendly, kind-hearted way we can, by treating the indigenous right, by dealing with all of our pollution, by fighting to create a shift to clean energy. If they did that, they wouldn't last 10 minutes in this system, because that's not how this system works. The system is based on how do you get profit over people at all times. And Donziger is one of the guys that fought it and technically won. But for that, he is one of the, biggest political prisoners in this country, at least in terms of how shocking his case is and how much people have talked about it. And where did our, if you want to take it outside of just Chevron and outside of just these corrupt judges and corrupt prosecutors, where did our politicians stand on this? Where did our so-called leaders, where were they? Were they out front? Were they chanting outside the courthouse? Were they, like with Zelensky? They had video. They Skyped or Zoomed in Zelensky to address Congress. Did they do that for Donziger? Were any of these politicians doing shit for Donziger? No. You might have heard one or two statements from the squad, but essentially, no. That is not what our politicians are. They don't give, their job is to be in bed with corporate power. They are corporate power. They are owned by corporate power. Corporations own the system. They bought the elections, and now none of them will stand up to that corporate power. They don't have the balls, or as Eleanor Goldfield has said on our podcast, it should be called vaginas because vaginas can take a pounding. Although I think that line originally came from someone else. But anyway, they don't have the balls of the vaginas to stand up against corporate power because that is who rules them. That is who rules our government. And so thank you, Stephen Donziger. I hope you will continue to fight